he helped shape over a lifetime as a husband, father, father-in-law, grandfather, great-grandfather, cousin, brother, uncle, coach, and a teacher for over 55 years. I'm so thankful to you, the Fabian family, for this great honor. I'd also like to thank Father Brad for his support of Tony and his family during his illness and for celebrating this beautiful funeral mass today. It's great to have you back, Father. As his next door neighbor for the last 32 years, I had a front row seat to Tony's day-to-day life. I saw firsthand his unwavering love for his family. They were truly the center of his universe, and I could see that he was the center of theirs. The kids grew up, moved out, started their own families, while I was just starting mine, having no idea what I was doing or how to navigate the events of child raising that would come. But I had one thing going for me. I lived next door to the greatest example of a father anyone could ask for. As Tony and Ned's house got emptier and quieter, there was one thing that never changed. Every Sunday, the driveway was full of cars. Everyone was back for Sunday dinner. I remember telling Tony, if I could have my children want to come back every Sunday like yours do, I don't think I could ask for anything more. Tony was always there with words of encouragement. There were numerous times I remember struggling with something, usually one of my boys having trouble in school or trouble with school and not knowing how to fix it. I would be outside and Tony would come over with a gentle, "How's it going, Donnie?" He had this sixth sense of knowing something was going on, something was wrong. He would gently check in with me and see what was on my mind. And I was explaining what was going on with Jeff or Pete, and Tony would always come up with a story about John, Tanya, Lisa, and share a trouble they had and the success that eventually came after that. And by the way, John, you were the good one. This went on through grade school, high school, and college. And Tony was a natural teacher, and every time you were around him, you had the opportunity to learn and grow if you just listened. And believe me, he was always there to share some wisdom and encouragement. Along with another amusing story, not to compare about one of his children. Needless to say, I always came away feeling better. Tony and Nadia bought their house on 178th Street in the 70s, and it was a true meaning of turning a house into a home. A place where all were welcome for a visit or an extended stay. We moved next door in 94, Abbott's son was Jeff in 95, Pete in 98, and as you know, not a lot of time for home improvements while raising two boys. Soon they were here at State Loop, playing sports, throwing balls over the fence into Tony's backyard. When he didn't throw them back, the boys would just jump over the fence. Well, between multiple climbing and soccer balls knocking out pickets, the fence was in obvious need of repair. One day, Tony comes to the fence, looks at me, and he said, "Hey, Donnie, we need to talk about the fence." And I felt horrible. I said, "Tony, I know. I'm sorry my boys have done this over the years. Let's just pick out a design. I'll build a fence. It'll be great." And he said, No, Donnie, that's not what I'm talking about. Let's tear the fence down." He said the boys would then have both yards to kick their soccer balls, to practice throwing baseballs, to throw footballs. He says, "Heck, you can let them knock it over." That was an insight to Tony Fabian, right there. When we live in a world where people seem to be building taller fences, Tony's tearing down. A metaphor describing his life, for sure. That also led to Tony setting up a 3-hole pitching golf course that both of our families enjoyed together in our shared backyard some years later. I mean, maybe he was a visionary, maybe he had ulterior motives. Either way, it was a decision that built strong bonds and turned neighbors into family. Tony's faith was the cornerstone of his life, guiding his actions and shaping his teachings. He was a devoted member of St. Luke Parish, a member of the Knights of Columbus, and a dedicated CYO supporter, coaching numerous soccer teams. After retirement, he was a substitute teacher here at St. Luke and Christ the King School. He even helped Dan Stapleton and I coach St. Luke soccer. You know, it was truly a joy watching Tony work with kids. And CYO sports was immensely important to Tony. Lisa said her dad made sure that his teams knew that playing CYO wasn't about winning or setting scores and records. It was about getting to know your teammates. Tanya remembered a time when she was playing for a select soccer team and remembered she didn't want to play for St. Luke anymore. Tony wasn't having it. Made sure she stuck with CYO even though it was a lot. She said, Dad made sure I understood that my St. Luke teammates were the people who cared about me and who I am. In hindsight, I could see he was right. When Tony helped Dan and I coach our St. Luke soccer team, he always gravitated to the players that struggled a little. He'd give them one-on-one time, making sure he squeezed a teachable moment in there while making practice fun, whether they realized it or not. Dan remembered the drill Tony would do at the end of the practice called rapid fire. The kids loved it. Tony would yell rapid fire and they would all run as fast as they could to do the drill. Something that didn't happen any other time during practice for sure. They'd run and laugh together like no other guard practice, begging to let them do one more round, much to the dismay of the parents sitting in their cars with dinner on the stove. Suddenly, practice wasn't work. But what they didn't realize is that on top of skill building, they were building relationships with each other that carried far beyond the sidelines of the soccer field. Dan recalled Tony standing back one time, watching them, smiling and saying, "See what we just did here?" Tony did the same when he was teaching in the classroom. He had an unwavering belief in every student's potential and a gift for unlocking that potential with his supportive teaching style. I'll always remember one of his over-the-fence talks with me. One of my sons was struggling with reading in school. Tony told me about an entire class he was given where no one was passing reading and comprehension. He realized that they didn't like what they were reading, meaning the books that were assigned them. They had to read them, come back, and write a report on what they read. He decided to let every kid in the class bring in something they wanted to read, something that interested them. He didn't care if it was Sports Illustrated, a comic book, or the front page of the paper, as long as they were reading. Needless to say, he unlocked the hidden potential of an entire class, along with one Jones boy. Another love of Tony's was a game of golf. He loved to watch the game, but was happiest playing it with friends and family, and even became an assistant coach at Seattle Prep. I thought about Tony a couple of times this week after watching the Open Championship golf tournament. Scotty Scheffler won that tournament, the #1 golfer in the world. And after the tournament, he said, "You know, winning awards are good. It's nice. But it only lasts for a few minutes. What's important is I'm able to get up every day and do what I love and to be with my family when the day is over. That's what's important. I thought of Tony when he said that. Spending the amount of hours and days and weekends teaching, coaching, doing what he loves, but being able to be a wonderful father and raise a fantastic family at the end of the day. It's just, who could ask for more? Rory McIlroy, one of Scotty's fiercest competitors, said, "Scotty, all around is a bar we're all trying to reach." I thought of Tony again. Because the way Tony lives his life at work, with friends, and especially with his family, it is the bar that we can all aspire to reach. I only remember one conversation over all these years when Tony turned the camera towards himself for one moment. It was when he was losing the love of his life of over 60 years, his wife Fabian. He looked at me on one of those over-the-fence talks that we no longer had, the fence, not the talks. And he said, "Donnie, I don't know what I'm going to do without her. She has been my purpose all these years." I was at a loss for words on how to comfort my dear friend. Thankfully, his faith and his family never left him and supported him when he needed it the most. During his illness and declining health, he was surrounded by his amazing family, never leaving him alone. Someone with him 24 hours a day. I mean, we almost need to set up valet parking on North 178th Street to accommodate the endless stream of relatives and friends coming back to get a little of what they've received from this special man. A true testament to the phrase, "You reap what you sow." Even in his final days, he would visit Tony, and in his true fashion, we'd want to know how you were doing. How you doing, Tony? How are your boys? How's your mother-in-law? How's your father-in-law? I know he's not seeing you again. It was amazing. But I guess the picture I'm trying to paint here is that Tony Fabian was the kindest, most generous, patient, humble, compassionate, and giving man I have ever known. Everything he did seemed to be for someone else and with a purpose. He always made you feel like you were the most important person in the room. They say that one of the measures of someone's life is not only what they did on earth, but what they left behind. What Tony left us is not only the family that he and Nadia built and the examples of what family means that will carry with them for generations to come,